Canadians have been telling pollsters for months the political landscape is shifting. Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives have held a steady double-digit lead over Justin Trudeau's Liberals, and the wheels are in motion for an election to be held next fall or earlier. Nominations, rallies, announcements. The parties are gearing up. Tonight, what could be a key indicator in a critical region. Voters in Durham, in the Greater Toronto Area, have had their say. Today, voting in a by-election to replace ousted Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. The frontrunner, Conservative Jamil Jivani, up against Liberal Robert Rock, NDP Chris Borja, and a slate of others. Tonight, Canada votes, and we're here live to guide you through it all as the results roll in. Well, the polls are closed and the counting has begun in that Ontario riding of Durham. Welcome to Canada Votes by-election night. Shortly, we'll find out who will be the newest MP in the House of Commons. It will be one of these 9 people who have spent the last month, maybe longer, campaigning around that large Ontario riding. And as the votes are counted, we'll have live results for you. With us all night, our Political Pulse panel. We got Greg McEachern, we've got Melanie Richer and Fred Delory. Gang, you're with me every Friday on Power and Politics. Thank you for being with us here on by-election night. Fred, let's start with you. This is a Conservative seat. I think there's a lot of expectation that it will remain a Conservative seat. What's your sense, and what's a good night for the Conservatives here?
This is obviously a very safe Conservative seat. We've held this for decades. Traditionally, over the last number of elections, we win by over 12% over the national polls and how we do in the general election. So what I'm looking for tonight is, are the polling numbers that we're seeing now, where Poilievre has such a big lead national, is it real? This will give us a good indication if Jamel gets in the mid-50s or higher, that those numbers are translating to actual people coming out in the ballot box. If it's lower than that, it's telling us that the polls may not be as rosy as they appear for the Conservatives.
Right, maybe people are just parking their anger, right? So the national trend lines right now have the Conservatives around 42%. So you're looking for low to mid 50s as a number in Durham, so we want to see it tonight. Okay, Mel, I don't know if the NDP are counting on low to mid 50s, but that would be quite the story if we get there. What's your sense? Chris Borja is running for you. What's a good night for the New Democrats here?
Yeah, for sure. Typically in the riding, it is a riding that the Conservatives do well in, both federally and provincially. So typically what we see for the NDP is mid to high teens. So I'm expecting kind of the same kind of numbers tonight. So if we see that, that would be a good night for the NDP. And if we see them competitive with the Liberals, I think that's also a good night. I think that tells a different story of what we can expect, not just in this riding, but outside of this riding as well. Okay,
Greg, I almost hesitate to ask. What are your expectations for the Liberals tonight? The national polling has not been kind. This is a tough seat for you, even in the best of times. What do you expect in Durham?
I insert a statement here with a pithy comment about lowering expectations.
Yeah, exactly. You've nailed it.
And I could, yeah. 2011, 2012, the Liberals were coming third in this. And in 2015, when the Liberals were doing really well, Erin O'Toole wasn't leader, but he still won with a decisive victory. So it's a tough riding for Liberals. I think what Liberals are watching for, and based on the very vigorous candidate that they ran there, he hit a lot of doors. There was a lot of enthusiasm. A lot of Liberal MPs went there and campaigned. I think what we're kind of watching for is in the the aforementioned time of polling, how does that affect? And let's watch for something that, as an East Coaster, you'd be familiar with, ABC, anybody but Conservative.
Yes.
And what happens to the NDP vote, and does it go to the Liberals in tonight?
Right, that is an interesting point, because I think that is the Liberal play, right? That they hope that the NDP vote between now and the next election maybe collapses and coalesces behind the Justin Trudeau banner. Would that be putting too fine a point on the strategy?
That sounds like a good game plan to me.
Yeah, well, all right. Okay, so that's Greg and Mel and Fred. They're going to be with me here all night. You may have noticed on your screen already an email address, ask@cbc.ca. So if you have any questions for the panel, or for me, or for the team about the by-election, federal politics, or the election year ahead, just send it to us and we'll try to answer it, and answer as many as we can. And if you're watching us on CBCNews.ca, you can leave a question in a comment. Okay. As the Conservatives grow their support in the polls, what happens tonight could give us a sense of how that's actually playing out in the critical GTA. Take a look at this. The Conservatives have held this Greater Toronto Area riding, or a version of it, for 20 years. But let's take a look at just the last 7 elections, 4 under Stephen Harper and 3 since Trudeau's Liberals took power. As Harper grew the size of his caucus, culminating in the strong, stable majority government of 2011, the Conservatives steadily grew their margin of victory, culminating in a win by more than 33 percentage points over the second-place NDP that year. Erin O'Toole picked up the riding in a 2012 by-election, beating the competition by more than 24 percentage points. But under the Trudeau Liberals, the Conservatives' margin of victory shrank to just 9 points in 2015 and just a little more in the two minority governments since. We'll be watching if the Conservatives hold this riding tonight, how much they might win by. Could tell us something about the mood overall in this critical region. All right, we have CBC Toronto's Clara Pasica there at Jamil Jivani's headquarters in Clarington. So Clara, this is Erin O'Toole's old seat. Tell us about what's going on there right now at the Jamil Jivani headquarters.
I can tell you, David, there is a lot of excitement here. Just after the polls closed, we saw a new stream of people coming in. Many of the people coming through these doors, they've been actually door knocking for this candidate all day, and they've come here. They've brought a lot of hope with them. People are shaking hands, they're giving hugs, they've got balloons, they've got giant signs. So I'm telling you, people are very, very hopeful here. This this plaza here is actually one that I've spent a lot of time in throughout the campaign. It's actually just sandwiched in between two discount grocery stores, which is quite apropos considering that the Conservatives have really tried to make this election a lot about pocketbook issues, that's for sure. So it'll be interesting to see who comes through this door next. He's had a lot of MPs, sitting MPs, who have knocked on doors for this candidate throughout the campaign. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any of those come through the doors.
Okay, so Clara, as you said, you spent quite a bit of time in the riding. What are you hearing from people there about their top issues?
Well, people are talking about the tension between housing and immigration. They're talking about not enough access to healthcare workers. They're talking about homelessness issues and, of course, affordability.
Top of mind for me, I would say, is affordability, especially when you consider housing affordability as well as just getting groceries, gas, whatever it may be these days.
Affordable housing, and that relates back to my issue as being a senior, that's single. It's very expensive to live anywhere in Canada nowadays.
Grocery and expenses and the housing. These are the major issues.
I spoke to a single mom here in this riding. She's gone back to school to train to be a nurse, but meanwhile she's working a low-wage job and she's struggling just to get by. Now, she's not alone in that. The food banks here told me that they've seen close to a 50% increase in just the last year in people using the services. Housing, another big issue here in this riding. Some people speaking about how there's some tension there between international students, placing some strain on the housing market here. So some people very concerned about that. So those are some of the issues that rose to the top here in this Conservative riding so far. And we'll see if the Conservatives are going to keep it that way.
All right, Clara, thank you so much. We're going to check back in with you as we get results. No numbers yet, but if you can see that hockey game up in the corner of the screen, it's Boston 3, Toronto nothing. All right, thank you, Clara. We'll check back in a bit. Fred, this is Erin O'Toole's old seat. You worked on Erin O'Toole's leadership campaign. You worked on his national campaign. You know this riding well. Tell us a little bit about Durham and how it breaks down politically.
I also helped on his by-election 12
years
ago.
So you've been there throughout it all.
That's right. This riding is an interesting one where it's really three different parts to it. There's Scugog, which is very rural Ontario, the way you would imagine it. Clarington, which is right off the highway, is a bedroom community to Toronto. So it's exploding in population over the last number of years, and that's why a big part of the housing issue that is coming. 1/3 of the riding is the city of Oshawa is actually a piece of this riding, and that's where Conservatives and Liberals tend to duke it out more. But housing is a major issue here.
Okay, it's going to interrupt. We're going to get back to this, but we have our first results. Now, it's early results. We're not going to overreact. Let's just put this up on the screen and see where we are. This is the first results. Oh, not yet? Okay. I'm told it's coming in 1 second. So anyway, I'm not going to scoop the numbers until we actually can show you the graphics in just a second. But Fred, you're talking about Clarington, bedroom community, a lot of population growth. We got a question from Jeff M. At the Ask at CBC.ca saying, have there been any demographic shifts in this riding over the last 20 years? If so, are they likely to have an impact on the long-term voting intentions in this riding? the GTA is nothing but demographic shifts. How does it play out there?
Certainly. There's been a huge influx of new Canadians over the last number of years into this riding. And we've seen it I've seen it at the party level, and the membership has changed drastically. So there's no question that's changing throughout the riding.
Mel, what's your sense of that? I mean, it's the fastest growing region or the largest region in Canada. You know, like I think where me and Fred and Greg are from, there's more seats in the ring around Toronto than there's in the 4 provinces of Atlantic Canada. How does a political party respond to that constant recalibration of going after a changing voter base?
Right. Well, I think it's going to the ground and going to talk to people, right? And figuring out who it is that you're talking to, who it is that's in these ridings that you're trying to either swing your way or keep your way. And I'll just build off of housing and the shifting demographics. I remember it wasn't that long ago where not very many people were living in Bowmanville, and now it's considered almost a suburb of Toronto, right? So how does that change? Who are the new electorate living in those ridings? There's a lot of young families there now. How does that change what you're talking about and what resonates with them? I think is something that parties consistently or constantly have to do, and I think we've probably seen some of that in this by-election as well.
Greg, what's your sense on Durham and the ridings around it, right? Because this is you get that east of Ontario thing, or sorry, east of Toronto thing. You got Whitby, you got Pickering, you got all of this territory.
Yeah, I have a brother in this riding, and he's lived there for about 20 years. And I can tell you can see the population growth, where he and his wife built their house, where there used to be cornfields, there's now schools. So that growth and that pressure that we're also feeling today around housing. You know, I remember working for the MP for Newmarket Aurora around the same time, 2004, 2006. You know, had the largest growth, you know, in any one riding was Newmarket Aurora around that time. And I can see it in this riding as well. The amount of growth, the amount of homes, but commerce, schools, you know, to handle the kids that are now living there. It's a huge amount of growth. And I think if I'm correct, during the next redistribution of ridings, this riding I don't think will exist in the same way that it does. And that also reflects a lot of population growth.
Yeah, it is going to get split up, and that is something we're going to talk about throughout the show. But, you know, we are seeing this, like the Durham that exists today, Fred, is not what we're going to be dealing with in the next election for the next parliament. There's 5 seats being added to the House of Commons. Is that right? We're going from 338 to 343?
Yeah, 343 across the country.
Across the country, yes. And a bunch of them are being split up and redistricted and redistributed, and it's going to change the voting base and the nomination challenges for some of the MPs, right?
It is, except for the Conservatives have grandfathered a lot of their MPs in some process that they've created, so a lot of them will remain the same. But there's no question the riding has changed a lot. And even if you look at the numbers, you showed the graphic earlier about O'Toole's margin of victory around 9%. It was trending down over the last number of elections for us as Conservatives around the GTA. It was getting worse and worse. Though we're building up in other parts of the country, our numbers were getting worse there. We did have a spike last time with him being leader. Of course, there was a bump from that. But it's something that I know the party, when I was there especially, was very concerned of, that it was trending in a very bad way. Now, we'll see tonight if that's reversed.
Okay, we got a graphic to show you just how this riding is going to change from the Durham that exists today to what it's going to look like for the next parliament. Have a look at this. This is Durham tonight. East of Toronto, it includes the northern part of Oshawa, Bowmanville, and stretches up to include Scugog and Port Perry. But in the next federal election, it will change as the country grows from 338 ridings to 343. Durham will be cut up between north and south, the bottom part becoming Bowmanville, Oshawa North, and the northern half joining a very large riding now called York-Durham. Okay, so you can see how it's splitting there, and Fred, we got a comment from Josie B, who says, the north end of the city of Oshawa shouldn't be in this riding. The concerns of the average voter in rural Port Perry or Clarington and the urban voter in densely populated North Oshawa couldn't be more different. How does this change address that concern?
Yeah, well, it moves it out. Scugog is now going into that northern riding, and the other riding is turning into a much more suburban riding, which traditionally is not good news for Conservatives. That's something long-term could be a riding that's much more competitive than it is now.
Okay, I don't know what's happening with the results graphic, but I'm just going to tell people what the results are, if that's okay, because they're out there. And Greg, you might want to do a Donald Trump and start screaming, stop the count here. The Liberals are in first place with 50% of the vote. They have 18 to the Conservatives 9, to the NDP's 7, and we have others with 1.
That's a decision desk in my ear, I believe?
Well, it's the CBC Anticipation Desk, maybe, the CBC Expectation Desk, but not the Decision Desk. Look, this is the first poll of 225 polls reporting. Robert Rock, the Liberal, has 18 votes, Conservative Jamil Jivani with 9 votes, and NDP candidate Chris Borja with 7 votes. Greg, just talk a little bit about Robert Rock, the Liberal candidate, who sought Fred's advice on running for the Conservatives. And we're going to get to that little narrative in a second. But tell us about him, his candidacy, and what do you think a good night is for him?
I think a good night for him is regardless of the outcome. I mean, he did a pitch, very interesting pitch to voters, which was, you can try me out as a member of Parliament for a year and a half, and then you get to return and make your decision. And I think for a riding like Durham, I think that's smart. I think it's smart politics. I think it's a creative way to approach it. The MPs that I've talked to, like Ryan Turnbull, who have been there and who have actually campaigned, come back very excited. They're very happy with the campaign. I look at this through my younger brother's eyes. He ran into Robert Rock. They had a great chat. I get my reports, from I trust my brother's take on things, and he was very, very impressed with him. I think, in terms of this riding, it was a bit of a bated breath for Liberals to figure out we hear nothing but poll coverage all the time. How is that going to affect a riding where we've not done well? Traditionally, we've picked up or we've held ridings like Ben Carr in Winnipeg, for example. Right. This is going to be a bit different. Will you have the enthusiasm of people to come out? And it definitely, from all the reports I've heard, they have not had they've not had trouble getting volunteers, getting signs out, doing events. So I think that's kind of been something where some people perhaps in the town here in the centre might have been a bit worried about and have not had to worry about.
Well, you've got more votes than the Conservatives and the NDP combined right now, so clearly the enthusiasm is there. But Mel, let's just talk about that pitch before I get to Fred on the Conservative conversation with Robert Rock. Try me out. Give me a chance. If you don't like it, 18 months, you can throw me out. I mean, what do you make of that? It's a novel pitch, right? Like, take me home for 30 days. If you don't like it, you can mail it back, sort of thing. It's like those assemble at home couches. Totally. What do you make of this pitch from Robert Rock?
I agree with you. I think it's creative. It's like a different way to pitch yourself to voters. I can't help but think of when leaders go out, and I've worked for a leader who's done this, but when leaders go out towards the end of a campaign and say, let's keep them accountable, vote for us to keep us accountable. And I know that folks at home want to vote for a winner. They want to vote for somebody who's going to be Prime Minister. They see you as somebody who's running to be Prime Minister, so they want to vote for somebody who's going to be Prime Minister. And I kind of saw this a little bit with the candidate as well. When you're saying, well, just try me out, you're kind of alluding to the fact that people aren't totally happy with your party, or not totally happy with your leader, or what does that mean for you? That's a little bit of the vibe that I got with that. But again, creative way to speak to people, and at least it'll punch through a little bit.
Greg, did you want to rebut that? I saw your hand come up.
Well, just the Conservative has been saying on Twitter, it's time for a change, which I think is a really, interesting approach, considering his party has held the riding for 20 years. And that may have backfired a little bit on Twitter.
He means big picture, not small picture.
But maybe it's like the old PC, think twice and you end up getting 2 seats. Be very careful here when you wish for change.
Okay, so Fred, on that, Robert Rock talked to you about running for the Conservatives in Durham?
Right.
The advice must not have stuck. Like, what happened there?
No advice was given back.
No advice was given.
Reached out to me and asked for to chat about it and sent me a text via LinkedIn. And I don't usually out people who seek advice from me. Right. But when you switch parties, I'll out you. So he did ask for to talk about the Conservative nomination. He is from the rural part of the riding. Was always
he's a ward councillor in the township of Scugog, which is what you were talking about right off the top. Right?
So I think he saw what was in front of him here and realized he had no path to win the Conservative nomination. Jamil was very well organized and it was obviously the party's chosen candidate. It's who they wanted in there. So I guess he just wanted to run for Parliament and went with the other party
For this election.
No, it was this election. Sorry, it was just.
I don't think
this by-election. Yeah.
Holy moly!
No, it's not news. This has been reported that he
We're spraining news, not breaking.
Okay,
news.
You're breaking it to me.
There you go.
That he did consider running for the Conservatives. I think what he would say, and what a lot of people in Durham would say, is that they feel that Erin O'Toole was betrayed. by the Conservative caucus, and that they hear a lot on the doorstep about people that don't feel that they have a party anymore, that their party has moved on. I would say most likely Robert Rock is a red Tory, and I don't think there's a lot of places in the Conservative Party today that feels more reform than progressive Conservative, and I think they heard that a lot on the doorstep. Whether that's enough to make people come out and motivate them to vote, but definitely that's I didn't see Aaron O'Toole doing a lot of door knocking with the Conservative candidate in this by-election.
Well, no, I mean Aaron O'Toole was here. He sat right there actually on Friday when we talked about the passing of Brian Mulroney, and we talked about this riding, and his departure was not pleasant. I mean, political careers tend not to end well if you stick around long enough. But people saying they feel like they don't have a party. If the Conservatives get 55, 56, 57% of the vote, clearly that's not the case, though, right? Can we draw that conclusion, even though it's just a by-election? Where do you think that plays out?
Their appeal is, what we've been told continuously is that they're trying to appeal to get the People's Party back. Right. So I am kind of going to be watching. I think, what was it in the last election? 5%, I think.
Yeah, a little over 5.
Yeah, and that's concerning. When they were, when they're beating the Green Party in certain ridings, I think that's where Conservatives' minds have to start paying attention. Right. And they do seem to be more concerned about getting that share of the vote back than appealing to, say, blue Liberals and red Tories. Okay,
I do want to talk about that because I think that's going to be an important storyline for the next election. But we have the results graphics. I think we can show them to you. Let's have a look. Look, there you go, Greg. This may be the high water mark. I'm not sure, but Robert Rock has a lead of 9 over Jamil Jivani, the perceived frontrunner. In this riding for the Conservatives, Chris Borja from the NDP is third with just 7 votes. And look, it's one poll of 217. The Greens, Kevin McKenzie with 1. Khalid Qureshi running for the, is that Dominic, the Centre Party? That's Dominic Carter's party? No? Yes, no.
They're not running a candidate.
They're not running a candidate. Okay, I'm going to confess, I'm not sure. Fred, maybe you can fill me in on this. But the People's Party of Canada, Patricia Conlon there with nothing so far. And these are the other candidates who are running in that by-election. Really, though, we're focused on the top 3. That's what we're going to be spending most of our time on. And we're going to dip into the People's Party of Canada vote because, Fred, this was a storyline that emerged in the last election. It wasn't enough to cost Aaron O'Toole the election, but in some smaller Ontario urban centres, which are big by Atlantic standards, and other areas, there was enough of a margin. And even in rural Newfoundland and Labrador, Scott Sims lost to Cliff Small, but he was the only Liberal who didn't have a People's Party of Canada candidate running against him. The others did, and there was a splintering effect that helped the Liberals in that. How big of an impact is this for the Conservatives?
So the People's Party cost us 5 seats roughly in the last election, based on where we think that vote would have gone to, understanding it's not 100% PPC.
Right, you might get half of it, some of it could go green.
Yeah, exactly. Green Party supports went into the PPC. But if you do the lazy math and just look at the PPC vote, it's around 26 ridings. And that was the mentality a lot of the Conservative caucus had, is that the PPC cost us 26 plus ridings, which made them very much focused on going after that PPC vote, which can be very dangerous, to Greg's point. We could move away from the middle if we do that, too far from the middle, and alienate them if we're trying to appease the PPCers. It is good tonight to see the PPC is currently tied with the Rhino Party with 0 votes. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, well, look, getting that 0 vote is not going to overcome that 50% margin that Robert Rock has right now at the 18-9 lead. Okay, we're going to go back to Clara in Clarington. Clara Pasica standing by with a guest. I believe it's the former MPP for Durham. Clara, what's the latest from there?
David, I'm here with Lindsay Park. She's the former MPP for Durham. And let's see what she has to say. So Lindsay, why do you think, firstly, that Jivani will make a great MP?
Well, I think he'll be a great voice and really represent Durham well. He's got a strong background as a lawyer, a community activist, and of course he's a millennial, so it's going to be great to see a fresh face like him in the House of Commons in Ottawa.
So you were also elected as a millennial just a few years ago. Why do you think that's particularly important at this juncture that we're at?
Well, when you hear the issues that are resonating with the community, many people talking about affordability, particularly young people, I think it's important that they have someone that understands what that's like in the House of Commons to speak to those issues every day.
And why do you think it's important to the party of who they're trying to attract to the fold?
Well, certainly, I think Jamil Jivani represents communities that in the past have felt underrepresented in the House of Commons, and I think it's really important voices like him and strong, educated, ethical voices are in the House of Commons in Ottawa.
So what do you think will be an exciting, what do you think would be the marker of success tonight?
Well, we're looking for a strong margin. I'm sure he'll be comparing himself to other people that have represented the riding federally in the past, but by election, I think we can expect lower turnout, but I think you'll still see a very strong showing from Jamil Jivani tonight.
Okay, that was Lindsay Park, the former MPP for this riding right here in Durham. Back over to you.
Okay, Clara, thank you very much. And Fred, just to pick up on the People's Party of Canada conversation, Lindsay Park, who's there supporting Jamil Jivani, was removed or resigned from the Doug Ford caucus in a controversy with Paul Calandra over the misrepresentation of her vaccination status at the height of COVID. And it sort of speaks to that COVID pandemic lockdown sort of grievance politics that is part of the PPC and some of the disaffected voters the Conservatives are trying to reach.
Right, and that's one of the things that gave the PPC their boost in the last election. The reason why they were able to get to 5% nationally was because of vaccine mandates. If that's removed next election, it's going to be very challenging for them to be able to get anywhere near that.
Yeah, we might need it for measles, but I don't know if we're going to go back to it for COVID. So, Mel, on that point, this is something that Jenny Byrne, before she sort of left the public eye, she used to do the podcast with David Hurley and Scott Reed and others talking about politics on the Hurley Burley podcast. She laid out quite plainly, she felt the strategy back for the Conservatives was to get the People's Party of Canada voters to come back into the Conservative tent. And you could see with the Portage-Lisgar by-election in Manitoba, they went hard at a lot of issues that would appeal to the People's Party of Canada. Is there risk in this? Because they seem to have consolidated a lot of it, and they've picked up on the anger towards the current government. What's the upside, what's the downside of this sort of strategy for the Conservatives?
Right, and I'm going to pick up actually on something that you said earlier about Erin O'Toole and the difference between Erin O'Toole and the current Conservatives. I actually ran into Erin O'Toole in this riding in the 2022 provincial election, and we talked as people who worked on the Hill did, and I said to him, and I don't think my parents would be upset with me for saying this, but if my parents didn't love me, they may have voted for Erin O'Toole in the last election, right?
So they didn't vote for Erin O'Toole, right?
Didn't.
Okay, just to confirm that part of the story.
So they did, yes.
Yeah, all right, good.
Thank you for confirming.
I didn't want the audience wondering.
But what that means is, they thought Erin O'Toole was reasonable. They thought Erin O'Toole had a lot of the same values that they did, and put forward a vision for Canada that was similar to what they were hoping as a vision for Canada. And I think the more you talk to or court the PPC voters, the more you move to the right, you're losing that reasonable middle. And I think one of the things that we're not really seeing in the polls right now, but I think will be interesting leading into the next election when we know that it's coming for real, is what that happens to that reasonable middle. Because people like my parents who saw Erin O'Toole as somebody reasonable, somebody they could consider in the next election, Pierre Poilievre is not that. So the more the current Conservatives move to the right, the more you risk losing those folks who are looking to elect somebody who they see as prime ministerial. And right now, that is not what they see Pierre Poilievre as.
But Greg, that middle is not really where the Liberals are either. They may be in the middle between the NDP and the Conservatives, but not in the middle traditionally of where a Brian Mulroney, Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien, sort of big tent brokerage party would have been. Politics has evolved way beyond that in the decades since.
Yeah, and the four of us had a year-end conversation, and I put forward that I think that the middle's moved, and it's not the same middle as when Jean Chrétien was facing, Preston Manning, and we also are coming hopefully out of a worldwide pandemic, which governments had to do things that governments never dreamed they would have to do.
Yeah.
But in terms of issues around vaccinations and where Erin O'Toole had the Conservative Party, this candidate is a kind of a good example, because as a media person, there were issues with his radio show around giving platforms to people that had anti-vaccination views, perhaps talked about some other treatments that might not have been ones that his managers thought were sound. There was a lot of issues around that. So I think if you're looking for a candidate that was closer to, say, the Max Bernier side of the Conservative Party, or the Erin O'Toole, I think he's definitely would be more appealing to the People's Party type of voter.
So on that, we have seen the Liberals with this MAGA Republican attack. Why MAGA and not Max? Like, why not use the Canadian version of what they consider to be the extreme fringes of politics rather than going for the American import?
Because people know who Donald Trump is.
Okay, all right. So then if there's not that level of recognition and awareness of the People's Party of Canada, of Maxime Bernier, what's the downside here, Fred?
It's not so much, it's not going after them, it's going after their issues. That's where the risk could be if they're going championing these issues. To the point earlier, though, about the middle moving, I feel it's not actually moving; it's evaporating.
It's kind of collapsed.
We're splitting into a right and a left. The Liberals have abandoned the middle as well. They're not there, and that's what shifts this and what makes this all very interesting. How this could all play out.
Okay, we're still waiting for numbers, gang. It's still 18-9 for the Liberals. So, Greg, this is a good moment. We got a question from Nathan P. He says, as we wait for the results, and wait for the results, it was mentioned that tonight might shed light on if the polls are accurate or not. Either way, what do you think is the main factors that are driving the polls to show so much favor towards the Conservative Party? Where do you see that, Mel? What's your answer?
I think people are upset. People are really frustrated. They're seeing a government not connected with the realities that they're going through, and like we've said, many times on this panel, instead of coming out and saying, I hear you, you're right, times are hard, we have a government that, immediately points to all the good things that they're doing, which aren't resonating, I think, with folks on the ground. And I think people are fed up, they're really frustrated, and I think a lot of that is really the frustration they see with the Prime Minister directly, and because we're in a time where the parties are so focused on the leaders, I think that actually is hurting the Liberals a lot. You mentioned earlier about sometimes the NDP vote collapsing and helping the Liberals. We've seen that for sure. I think what the NDP is looking at and what they're banking on, not just perhaps in this by-election, but generally is this time that may not play out in the same way because people are so frustrated with Justin Trudeau and they see a leader talking about affordability in the Conservatives, whereas a way to beat that is to beat him on affordability when those attacks of MAGA whatnot are not actually sticking to him in the same way. So that, to me, is what we might see tonight might play out in a bigger way, national poll-wise.
Greg, what's your answer to that question? Why do the polls seem to be so overwhelmingly Conservative? Because it's now 8 months, I'd say, of pretty locked-in trends and maybe widening a little bit.
So I can point to any leader that was in charge during the pandemic. Many of them have been defeated. We see this happening in Quebec with Legault. Global inflation, yes, many people angry. But, if I'm going to be really blunt, the Liberals should never have been reduced to a minority in the 2019 election. They should have had back-to-back majorities. They were doing very well up until that point. And a lot of mistakes were made in 2019. And when you are in a minority government, obviously the opposition has much more power. It changes how things are covered. It changes how much play certain MPs get, certain opposition leaders. And I think that's a big part of it, is that there were times where this government could have been great and they were good. And there were times where they were good and they were adequate. And I think, you lose, the money that you've set away for the rainy day. Well, it poured for a couple of years. And that's part of it. Going back to the earlier conversation, I think part of the reason why Liberals are still around and motivated is because the leader of the Conservatives is not Erin O'Toole, who would have been less upsetting to them. Everyone knows that you have a certain best before date and you don't get to govern forever. But I think the reason why Liberals are motivated is because that this Conservative leader seems to be pushing further and further to the right when he doesn't have to. The polls are going so well for him. Why are you saying things that are so upsetting to people, when the language that you're using, what you're calling your opponents? Things have really changed, and I think that really feeds the anger. If your role model is calling someone a racist, it allows you the comfort to do that in your backyard too.
So, Fred, I wonder about these same things and talk about them on the show every day. Is Poilievre growing and sustaining his lead because he's acting like that, or is he putting a ceiling on his lead because he acts like that? How does it work, I wonder?
Right. Well, we'll have to find out and see.
Yes,
it's a
of
big
course.
prediction.
Yeah.
But I'll just say to the point, why the lead is how big it is. I think there's two parts to it. One is the Conservatives and the Liberals. The Conservative side, we had by-elections last spring. We had 4 by-elections. We had a lead in the polls then, nowhere as big as it is now. And keeping in mind, we won the last 2 popular votes the Conservatives had in the last 2 general elections. But in those by-elections last spring, 3 out of 4 of them, the Conservatives went backwards. The polls didn't. People actually didn't show up to vote. The leader had high negatives, and it showed at the ballot box. The Conservatives went to ground on that last summer and rebranded him and came out and spent more money into, I believe, any ads outside of an election that any party's done, certainly in my experience. They put millions of dollars and rebranded him and pushed him out. And since then, he's really caught on with his issues and the main narrative that he's pushing. At the same time, the Liberals have no story to tell. I don't even know why they're still in government, why they want to be in government. They're not telling us that. So I think it's a combination of both. The Conservatives have been doing a great job in the last 8 or 9 months, and the Liberals have been absent.
Okay, we're now 36 minutes in, and 36 votes have been counted. We're told there's more than 10,000 advance votes that have been cast, so that, at this rate, that'll be 6.94 days. So we've got a bit of time to fill because we're here till the bitter end, gang. Just kidding. But you know, you mentioned earlier, Mel, that Aaron O'Toole, your family could have voted for Aaron O'Toole. Pierre Poilievre is not Aaron O'Toole. Well, Aaron O'Toole was here on Friday, and I asked him about this particular by-election because he resigned after losing the election, being forced out by the caucus through the Accountability Act that his party adopted to put in place. And I asked him about his expectations for the riding tonight. Here's what Aaron O'Toole had to say. Mr. O'Toole, let's just start. There is a by-election Monday in your old seat. Just what's your expectation for how that's going to go, and what do you think the key issues will be in that particular race?
Well, the key issue is in Durham, it's in Vancouver, it's in Montreal, it's in St. John's, is the cost of living and the crisis of inflation and the impact with renewals for mortgages coming in. People are squeezed, and so we're seeing inflationary numbers come down, but people aren't feeling that in their own household budget yet. So I think the Conservatives are going to win a very strong mandate. Jamil Jivani is a young lawyer and commentator that I've known for many years. I think he's worked hard on the hustings. So my expectation is it's going to be a big, solid blue wave, David. When I held that seat in 2015, when Mr. Trudeau had his red wave in Ontario, I know a lot of Liberals were shocked that we held on. So I'm also very proud of the volunteers and the folks that supported us. And so obviously I'm biased. So I think you're going to see a very big blue result, probably far higher than any of the levels I was able to achieve, because you're now looking at national polls that are very different than they were in 2012 when I was elected in a by-election, or 2015, 2019. So we'll see. I'll be tuning in with great interest.
What do you think people should know about the riding of Durham?
Well, go to Durham and spend your money. There's great restaurants. There's great things to do. There's the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. No, I won't do any more advertising. It is a quintessential 905 seat, David. So people that watch your show know how important the 905 is to Canadian politics. Stephen Harper won the confidence in the 905 through the courts of his government. We lost that in 2015, Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals. The 905 is changing. They're almost kind of tired with the government. I think they're tired with Mr. Trudeau not kind of living up to the promise and the hope and hard work and all that sort of sloganeering. So I think people should watch that part of the race, because the 905, like it or not, rest of Canada, there's so many seats there that will really dictate who forms government. Gosh, I wish the 21 election was held midway through the election, because we were winning the 905. We didn't at the end. And so I think the polling numbers show the 905 has switched. So Durham and the communities of Bowmanville and Oshawa and Port Perry, they're already Conservative. So I'm expecting a very big result. But Jim Flaherty's old riding, for example, Whitby, that's a seat that will have to flip. Pickering, Uxbridge. These are seats that the Ontario PCs hold, but the federal Conservatives don't. So that, I think, you could watch. And I think in many ways, Jamil will hold on to our seat, but a big result will kind of show where the 905 is going. And I think the Liberals will have to really come to terms with whether the election's in 6 months or a year, is that 905 going to change back? I don't think it will.
Right, and that spillover effect, that could be trouble for Ryan Turnbull and Jennifer O'Connell, who are Liberals who hold the seats. That's what you're talking about there.
Yeah, no, we were, and some of my policies in 21 were trying to appeal to voters that hadn't voted for us in previous elections in those seats. And midway through, they were kind of coming to us in the polling and in the tracking, but they didn't at the end, or some PPC splits, a whole range of things. If the 905 shifts in large ways, like it did in 15 behind Mr. Trudeau, as it did in 2012 behind Mr. Harper, that delivers not just governments, but if you do it well, it delivers majority governments, because what resonates in the 905 generally resonates in Burnaby, generally resonates in the Winnipeg ridings, generally resonates in other suburban ridings, Bedfords and Halifax and places like that. So I think people, beyond watching the results of Durham, because it's probably a conservative hold, where are things at in the 905? Does Mr. Jivani get a huge win? That will be an indication of what's coming, I think.
Yeah, the margins and the road to power is through the suburbs of Canada. All right.
The hardworking suburban families I had the honor of representing for a decade. It will be up to someone else now.
Okay, that's former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole is here in the studio on Friday. And you know what? We're going to take his advice. We're going to go to Durham. We're going to go to one of those restaurants. We're going to go to Chuck's Roadhouse, because that's where Clara Pasica is standing by, and she's got a guest for us. Clara.
David, I'm here with Raj Radhi. He is one of the volunteers on this campaign. Raj, how are you feeling tonight?
Oh, good. How are you?
Okay, and how exciting is this for you to be here with so many volunteers tonight?
I mean, it's my first time that I started working for this volunteering activity, and I feel blessed to be part of this campaign especially.
Okay, so what drew you to volunteer on this campaign?
I start saying this. So it's my 6th month here in Canada. Soon after coming here, I figured out something is not going very well. So I thought to support the person who stands for the people and who cares for the Canada. So I started looking for the opportunities, and I see this by-election as a better opportunity. So I started supporting, and now I'm here with you today.
Okay, and we're so glad that you are here with us today. Now, is there a particular issue that really stood out to you that you feel isn't going quite right, that you'd like to see change on?
Yes, I'll say. I mean, there is this day I got down at my stop and I started walking to my home. I was stopped by some burglars. So that was the worst part. So I was not quite happy about this country. So I want to see something get changed in the future. So I see this as an opportunity, and I definitely believe that Conservative Party is going to stand for all these kind of things, and they'll definitely put end to this kind of activities.
Okay, so I mean, being a volunteer is quite a lot of work. How many doors would you say that you knocked on for this campaign?
I'd say I knocked around 317 doors for these 12 days, and around 180 people, they were totally positive. And yeah, that's it. It went very good.
Okay, do you have any predictions of what we're going to see happen tonight?
Yes, I mean, we don't have any other option. We only have one person, Jamil Jivani.
Okay, so certainly some enthusiasm there from this volunteer, and we'll keep talking to people in this room and who are bringing their enthusiasm to us here.
Okay, Clara, you keep talking. We'll hope Elections Canada keeps counting. We're going to have some new results for you soon, but we're still in the very early stages, Fred, of numbers coming in here from the Durham by-election. Brand new, already working on a campaign, like just in the country, like that's wild, right? Well, it shows how much we can take for granted, right? The ability to work in a political campaign. Yeah. I mean, voting may be an issue, I don't know, but volunteering on the campaign, whatever you think of it, it's good to see.
Yeah, here 6 months and already knocking on doors and putting up signs. I think that's fantastic. And also shows, I think, where the momentum the Conservative Party currently has. If you're coming here now and you're looking at the country and you're seeing where a potential wave is going, it's going this direction.
Okay, speaking of Conservative momentum, we've got some new results that we want to show you here. And sorry, Greg. Jamil Jivani has moved into the lead. Again, very early results. 5 of 217 polls reporting. Jamil Jivani, the Conservative frontrunner, has moved to a 16-vote lead over Robert Rock from the Liberals, with Chris Bourgeois from the NDP currently in third. Look, still very early, but Mel, this is probably the trend line I think that a lot of people were expecting. The decision desk, as I've been saying, is still doing their work. The expectation desk has basically said that Jamil Jivani is probably going to be the MP at the end of the night. Any thoughts on what we just heard and seen?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, I think it's like 5 polls reporting, so we'll see. We'll see when more come in to see what the broader picture is. To your point earlier, Fred, how much is he winning this riding by? Where the Liberals and NDP kind of stack up, but I'm not totally surprised by the numbers so far.
Yeah, the People's Party of Canada, just to touch on our earlier conversation with, they have 10 votes. They're 4.7%. But Greg, you know, we don't know where this is going to go. What's a percentage of the vote that's good for the Liberals here? You know, Fred laid it out that usually in Durham, they're 10 to 12 points above the national polling, gets into the low 50s. I know there's some optimism in some Liberal circles last week about how the campaign was going there, the professionalism of the outfit and the organization. But, you know, as Mel was saying earlier, and we'll get into this, there's, you know, the NDP are feeling pretty good about their chances there to have a solid maybe second or tight with the Liberals. What's a good night here?
You're damn determined to make me do math on air. And everybody I went to high
testing
school
the Cape
with
Breton
is
school
going
system.
like, yeah.
St. of X, let's see it.
I would like to thank Mr. Mulrooney for the arts building that I think I looked at Eric Grenier's numbers about where he expects the Liberals to be. I think that might be a little low if I've read that correctly. I would want to see that a little bit higher. I think.
What did he have? What did Grenier have?
If I have
like
it correct,
in low 20s, right?
Yeah, I think he had them at 20, if I have that correct. And I think, you know, based on other elections, even, you know, 21, which was not a great one, Liberals were, you know, ahead of that. So I think that's kind of where you want to be. I don't know at the end of the day, and I know this is going to sound like I'm, you know, spinning, you know, a potential loss, but there weren't great hopes around this riding based on you know, polling. I think what gave Liberals a lot of hope around this was what happened with the riding of Oxford, a recent by-election, where the former MP came out and supported the Liberal candidate because of what he called interference in terms of how the candidate got parachuted in. And what shouldn't have been a close election in Oxford ended up being one. So I think, you know, Liberals would like to see something like that, that the signs of life are indicative of, you know, something else. People didn't like the fact that, you know, there was a fracturing of the local Conservative riding association because a candidate was forced on them. And we're also seeing a certain type of candidate for the Conservatives. If you were a former staffer and if you were a National Post columnist, or even better, if you were both, you are an ideal candidate to be a Conservative candidate right now.
So a staffer who wrote for the Post is the new went to McGill and worked at Queen's Park? Is this what we're getting
Yeah, I think that's what I'm reading.
We have a question from Sandy M. saying, does the Conservative nature of a riding like Durham mean that the Liberals, Greg, I'll let you handle this, can play off a defeat as simply a Conservative electorate doing what they usually do? I mean, they could, but would they be wise to do it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, if history, you know, if we were to look at history, usually that's the way by-elections are covered. I mean, we tend to talk about them a lot the day of and maybe the day after. But most by-elections don't rate a huge amount of attention unless there's something really, really significant. Even the Oxford one that I mentioned, I had to go back and reread what happened. I remember at the time there was a lot of attention, but you know, it didn't end up being a Liberal win. It made things uncomfortable for the Conservatives for a little bit, and sometimes that's the best win you're going to have in a riding where you don't have a shot.
Okay, we're being told by Elections Canada the very first results we saw, the 18-9 Liberal lead, were special ballots. And now what we're getting in this tranche of reporting, these are day-side votes. So this is going to be votes that were cast today, sort of thing. So Fred, on this, let's talk a little bit about Jamil Jivani, right? So Oxford, as Greg was talking about, Arpancana was sort of parachuted into Oxford because, you know, it was close connections with Andrew Scheer and with Mr. Poilievre as their, you know, director of outreach in a lot of ways. Jamil Jivani is not from Durham, but you know, he spent some time there. He's got some family there. He's from the region. But we've seen a lot of appointed candidates by the Conservatives in seats, you know, like that aren't nominated, just picked and you get to run.
It's certainly a very different process than when Mr. Harper was leader of the party. He was very, very much adamant that it was a grassroots process to choose candidates. So there is a different, each leader has their own style. And Mr. Poilievre is bringing in people who are certainly aligned with him. He's bringing in like-minded conservatives for the most part. That's what we're seeing. But Mr. Jivani is, he has lived in that region. It's Durham region, as we always call it. And it is a big area, and he's been there for different parts of his life. He's been in that area, so he certainly does have a link to it.
Yeah.
That I think is strong.
Yeah, no, I certainly wasn't trying to imply he has no connections there. And you get into the bigger cities, you're over the boundaries, you move back and forth. It's not like an Atlantic-Canadian context where you don't even live in the riding, and that becomes more of an issue. Mel, I mean, what do you think of a candidate like Jamil Jivani, who media commentator, pretty to the right, conservative? I don't say that pejoratively. He went to Yale Law School. J.D. Vance, who is a Republican senator, wrote the book Hillbilly Elegy. Really good friends. They mention each other in the various books they've written. What does a guy like him bring to the conservative movement should he win this tonight?
Right. I'll say, maybe I'll just not speak about the candidate directly, but talk about candidates that I've had to work with. A lot of times, people who have had a platform, when they come in and they become an MP, now have to change the way that they behave. And that is not easy. That is not an easy thing to do. People come in and think, well, I'm still a pundit. I'm still somebody who has a lot of opinions and who can share all those opinions and do what I want to do. And now you're part of a team. You have to, when you're part of a team, you have to agree to certain rules to be part of that team, to get the benefits of being part of that team. So I, appreciate his experience. If he does become the MP, though, he's going to have to make some changes, or it'll be, we'll see him do things, and they won't necessarily line up with what the leader wants to talk about. And then, if that's the case, we've got a bad news day, and you stack up enough of those, and trends start changing. So that's kind of the perspective that I have on that one.
That's a really good point to bring up, Greg, because we are not seeing a lot of pundits and people doing their own thing in this conservative caucus right now. The Hill Times had a story this week where Chelsea Nash, the reporter, chased conservative MPs down the street to get them to weigh in on the trans policy. MPs who had spoken out for LGBTQ plus rights in the past. You're seeing a very strong caucus discipline that everyone has fallen into line on.
Yeah, and I think it's probably very tough for people who have on their website conservative MPs, that talk about these issues that are very important to them. They're there. They're set on their website. And, in the case of the Hill Times report, literally sprinted away. What Mel talks about is absolutely right. You often see it with people who came out of municipal politics into federal. They're not used to the party system, or somebody who was used to having, some sort of voice. I think that's probably going to be a challenge should the Conservative candidate be successful. Tonight, Benzie from the Toronto Star mentioned it on your show last week that he had heard from Queen's Park Conservatives that this person might not be exactly what he called a team player. Yeah. And that's going to be really, really tough for people. Because remember, the person who does get to seem to speak a lot for Conservatives is Andrew Scheer. He's 2 leaders ago. He was dumped quite, bluntly over some expense issues, I believe. But yes, he'll be the person that you might see pop up on TV. If you're one of the other Conservative MPs, you're starting to wonder, hey, I had my own TV show, I had my own panel. Why don't I get to talk?
Well, maybe he will get to talk. Fred, just quickly on that, because we've got to go to guests, but your thoughts on this, and we'll come back and do another round.
I think we're wrong here, and we're looking at this as if he's not aligned with Poilievre. He very much is, and I think when we hear him speak, he speaks for the leader because they are very much aligned. Yes,
and that is a very good point. That is certainly the impression you get from when you hear Mr. Jivani speak, and very much aligned in the numbers right now because we have new numbers, and he continues to grow his lead over the Liberal candidate here. We're going to put these up on the screen. Jamil Jivani with a lead of... Here we go. I heard the little beep in my ear. Jamil Jivani, 157 votes with a 66-vote lead over Robert Rock. Now, that's, again, early numbers. 7 of 217 polls reporting, but we've gone from the special ballots, which were cast in advance, showing Robert Rock with an 18-9 lead over Jamil Jivani. Now, as the votes come in that were cast and counted throughout the day, he has moved back into the lead, or at least with 7 of 217 polls down. Okay, we're going to go back to Clarington, Ontario, where Clara is standing by, and she's got a Conservative MP with her. Clara.
I I'm here with Michelle Ferreri. She is the Peterborough-Kawartha MP. How are you feeling tonight?
Great. It's very exciting. Really looking forward to it. There's a lot of excitement, obviously, in the air here. Durham's been without an MP. We're ready for a Conservative MP, and I think Jamil is definitely the guy to bring it home.
Okay, so he could potentially be your colleague. Why do you think that he would make a great MP?
Well, I think if you followed Jamil at all, I think you see a lot of what he does in terms of his ability to communicate. He's obviously a millennial, so he knows what millennials are facing in terms of that hardships of trying to find housing, the cost of living. He's an excellent communicator. He brings a wealth of experience, personal lived experience as well. I think he's going to be a huge asset to our team.
Okay, so I've been in this riding having a lot of conversations. A lot of people are talking about those topics that you're talking about, housing, affordability. However, a lot of people are also saying they're not really sure who has the solution and what those solutions are. What is the Conservative Party going to do about those problems that people keep pointing out?
Yeah, I think it's an easy solution. You know, I remember feeling like that when I first got elected. How are we going to fix this? The cost of living, the housing crisis, crime, you know, domestic violence. These are serious issues. They're big, big problems that we have in our country. And I think it's really easy. I think one of the first things you have to do is you have to axe the tax. It is the simplest, most concise thing to do that will bring down the cost of everyday expenses. I shared a story in the House of Commons of a young woman who has a home business. And she lost her business because of the cost of butter, the rising cost of butter, which is directly linked to the carbon tax. That's going up on April 1st by 23%. People cannot afford any more of that. So in answering your question, those are the simple, tangible things that need to be done. You need to stop spending more than you're making, and we need a government in charge that understands fiscal responsibility so that also houses can be made and that's affordable. People need to be able to house themselves.
So why do you think that your party is doing well in the polls right now?
I think we have a clear, concise message that reaches all people. You have young people right now that feel they're never going to be able to own a home. You have young people trying to go to university or college, trying to get a job. They can't even afford to go out and get basic groceries or meat. And then you have seniors who are in fixed incomes that cannot afford to live, who are forced back into the workplace. You have over 2 million people a month using a food bank. We're the only party saying, hey, listen, we hear you. Enough suffering, enough chaos, enough crime on the streets. Public safety is a massive concern for people. And so we're the only party that's delivering this clear, concise message is saying we see it and it's time for common sense and it's time to stop the overspending and it's time to make life affordable again.
So that was Michelle Ferreri. She is the Peterborough-Kawartha MP.
Okay, Clara, thank you so much. And Fred, you mentioned that Jamil Jivani is very much in line with the messaging from Pierre Poilievre. Boy, so is Michelle Ferreri. We just heard it there in that answer. You know, she very much, that is very much consistent with the message we've been hearing from the Conservatives for the past year.
And it shows the campaign discipline they have in pushing that message out. And that's why I think when you see Jivani talking, when he's elected to the House, he's going to be hitting on these issues. There's candidates across the board that the Conservatives are bringing in. You have Aaron Gunn in BC, who is had a platform, puts out lots of YouTube videos. I think you're going to be seeing him putting out a lot of stuff too, but it will be aligned with what Poilievre's message is.
Okay, and just by the way, I'm looking at a story here. Margarine and butter prices are soaring. Here's why, and it's about why margarine and butter is so expensive in the United States of America, where there is no national carbon tax. Food prices are set on a global standard, and carbon inputs are only one small part of it, folks. It's a way more complicated explanation than that. For more simple numbers, we have more results from the riding of Durham. And there you go. The lead is really opening up now. 20 of 217 polls reporting 607 votes for Jamil Jivani, a 285-vote lead over Liberal Robert Rock. I know this is still very early, but a little bit of a trend line is starting to emerge here. Fred, your quick thoughts on that, and then
we haven't even seen the advanced poll numbers, which I think will be a huge lead for the Conservatives. I know they focus very hard on getting people to the polls early. Jenny Byrne herself was out helping lead a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see this lead even get potentially bigger.
Okay, Mel, what are you seeing? I don't know if we can put those numbers back up, but you're like the hope of, it went by pretty quickly. Yeah, the NDP are back a fair bit from the Conservatives. Now it's early, I mean, but what do you make of this?
It's funny that you just said wait till we see advanced votes, because typically advanced votes, do help the NDP. Now that's when the NDP is obviously closer to potentially being the winner in the riding. But yeah, 133. We'll see where it goes. I would assume that this is probably going to trend close to where the NDP usually is. As for the the overall messaging coming out of this, I think it's still too soon to tell.
Yeah, the Conservatives, Greg, hovering at about 50% of the vote so far. Still very early, but your thoughts, and I want to talk a little bit about advance polling, because it used to be that was a thing people did. Now it's like you put your most staunch and dedicated and likely to vote voters into the advance polls as much as you can, so you can go after the softer targets on election day. It's just changed the way elections are being done, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's also a test run of your ground game for E-Day, for Election Day. And I think we're all going to have a point of view that our respective parties, worked really hard for the advance, because that's what I had heard. I had heard, from people in the riding saying, you know what, I'm kind of impressed. I'm pleasantly surprised that the Liberals are getting folks out here. Just to follow up, though, on something that Fred had said about getting the message out, the Conservative candidate didn't do debates this time, and that seems to be kind of a theme.
That's not uncommon. Last couple of elections. That's the playbook, right?
Since I came to Ottawa.
All right.
But when you say they're getting the message out, where are they getting the message out? Is it just door to door? Yeah, because video, digital, I think, is probably where you would reach a lot more people, but you don't want to put anything in writing or have anything on tape. I mean, MP Ferrari there, I can't wait to see her on this panel soon. Why are you guys hiding these MPs?
Well, it's not Fred, but
why are you not putting them out more? And so I do find that's a bit, it's a bit false to say they're great communicators when only really two people on behalf of the caucus are allowed to communicate broadly.
No, I would say there's a strong communication discipline. And Melissa Landsman, too. I would put her in there. She does do a lot of media, especially in the GTA as well. She's out, right? But, Fred, there is power in politics, CBC writ large. It is very difficult to get access to Conservative MPs on a regular basis for a litany of reasons. But talk a little bit about that strategy and advance polls, the tighter communication and an earlier focus on voting.
So, I mean, obviously during a campaign, local campaigns have two jobs to do. ID vote, get them out. So if you have an opportunity to get them out with more days to do that with advanced polls, you do that. When it comes to messaging, though, and what they're doing in these by-elections, there is the digital component. There's mail, direct mail, phone calls, and door knocking is the absolute best use of a candidate's time. And a lot of times, we all say that here. It's hard to get candidates and teams to do that in some ridings. But from what I understand in this riding, they were working very aggressively at doing that and getting their message across at the doorsteps.
Okay, we got some more numbers now that we want to show you, and it is a widening Conservative lead. Just take a look at this. All right, Jamil Jivani now at 762 votes, a lead of 369 votes over Robert Rock for the Liberals, and in third place, Chris Borgia for the NDP. And that's with 25 of 217 polls reporting. Still too early for the CBC decision desk to make a projection. But we're going to show you a new graphic that we're unveiling as part of our elections package, which is going to sort of show you the trend line so you can see how this is going. Now, this is like, when you're watching a football game on Sundays and they show you the lead changes. So Greg, it started out great for the red team, and then it shifted pretty quickly with the Conservatives moving into first place. And in terms of how the decision desk is going to make its decisions, it's going to look at this and see if there's a consistency in the trend line, if the gap is widening, if it's staying consistent, and of course cross-reference that with historic data from this particular riding and look at the total number of votes that have come in. But right now, still too early for the CBC decision desk to make a projection. We project, we do not declare. But you could see a clear trend line developing there. And Greg, what's interesting, those splits, it's 50% to 26% to 11% for the NDP. It's kind of the Conservatives right now, if these hold, and it is very early, I will say this caveat again, they're above the national poll trend line. The Liberals are kind of at or just below, and the NDP are down quite a bit. And the People's Party of Canada sitting there at 4.4%. What are your thoughts, Greg, as you see this?
I am looking at how far the NDP are back. So, we'll know, in a little while. Only 25 polls right now. We'll know in a little while whether or not that NDP vote did bleed to the Liberals. And there's going to be, I'm uncomfortable about projecting a by-election on too much, but we've spent a lot of time on our panel talking about the NDP Liberal deal. The Conservatives certainly talk a lot about it, and I do wonder if there's some implications. If the NDP vote really goes to the Liberals here, it'll be a conversation.
Mel, we do tend to focus on the Liberals and the Conservatives in a binary on some of these things. But, I have Liberals mischief making saying the story of this could be a low NDP number and people should be asking questions about whether it's time for Jagmeet Singh to go, not just our guy to go. At a certain point, is that a conversation that happens? I don't know. Because, sort of the caucus got cut in half in the first election, stayed flat in the second election. What would a third election look like, especially if the supply and confidence agreement doesn't seem to be bearing fruit from either side outside of the policy wins? Do you know what I mean in terms of a political bump?
Yeah, for sure. Jagmeet has probably said this himself, so I'm happy to say the same thing. But in the last two elections, we actually joked about how Jagmeet got to keep his job and the Conservative leaders didn't. So this is something that, that Jagmeet has talked about. But the chips are usually down against the NDP, and Jagmeet is somebody who's often had the chips down against him too. So he is a fighter going into 2019. I don't know if you folks remember, but I'll have PTSD for the rest of my life. But it was chaos. Everybody was going to lose. We were going to hold on to one seat. We were not going to have anything, and we ended up having 24. So those conversations will happen, and I'm sure Jagmeet will have them with his family as well. He's got a young family. Who knows what happens? Again, too early to tell.
Oh, look, and it's just Durham. It's not like, oh my God, a disappointing Durham result means Jagmeet Singh's got to go tomorrow.
Now, if this was, downtown Toronto and we were seeing, I don't think we would be seeing blue numbers like this, but if we were seeing the NDP vote collapse in downtown Toronto in a place where they think they're doing much better than they did the last election.
This is Danforth, not Durham. It would be a very different level of anxiety right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, Fred, before we let you gloat for the Conservatives, we're going to show you some more numbers, which will increase the blank-eating grin on your face. Great. Here we go. The latest numbers from Durham. Look, a 588 vote lead now with 30 of 217 polls reporting. The last time we showed you numbers, I think it was 25 or 26 polls, which is about 12% of the total polls that have been cast. Or what are we at now? About a little bit more than that. 13.8%, Meg tells me in my ear from the control room. She told me there'd be no math, but she's providing me the answers for the test. So there you go. You're seeing that it widen, and I don't know if we'll go back to that trend line graphic, Fred, because it's only a few more polls, but it's starting to lock in right now.
It is, and it's at that number over 50%. Or we're going to see votes.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that, 53.7%. So
that's 12% over the Leger marketing had us at 41 national. So it's exactly in line with what I expected us to get. So to me, this shows that the national polling we're seeing, I think this is bearing fruit. It's showing that people are going to the ballot box and voting Conservative at that numbers that we're seeing. This is obviously, I know people say by-elections are just one riding, they don't matter. This is, I think, the most important poll we're seeing right now in the country. If you look at national polling, they sample 500 to 2,000 people across the country. These are tens of thousands of people that are voting here and giving us a real indication of what the score is.
The other score is Boston 4, Toronto 1. I just want to put that on the table. I don't know if it's tens of thousands of people right now. We've got like 2,000 people. Yeah, no, I know. And we're expecting a big drop in numbers towards the end of the night, folks, with the advanced polls, because our understanding, and this, we're often given an understanding on election night, and then it changes on election night, that those would be the last votes counted, but where it's 10,000, they don't want to drop that many all at once, so we might see that come in dribs and drabs throughout the night. So, Greg, look, it's about 25% for the Liberals. If you're in line as a Liberal with the national poll in the former Conservative leader's seat, where a highly recruited, well-known Conservative candidate is running, can you live with that result when you had no expectations that you were going to win this in the first place? Are you looking more at the Conservative number or the NDP number at the end of the night?
I think you're looking at the NDP number because Liberals have not really had a great opportunity to see what is really real there in terms of polls. We know provincially there's some challenges, in New Brunswick for the PCs. Recently, we talked about a poll on the Friday show in Saskatchewan, where Scott Moe is, has the NDP up a few points. Other things can happen at the same time. I think there was probably some times in the last couple of weeks that there were Liberals that would probably be very concerned about placing third in a place like Durham, because they placed third there in 2011 and in 2012 when Fred was working on the first Aaron O'Toole by-election. So, how bad is bad? And this is, and I did raise the NDP conversation. Durham is not a great slice of Canada in terms of not a bellwether riding, not a riding that flips around a lot. So we are trying to look at tea leaves here that might be really tough to project on the rest of the country. But the first thing when I was preparing for this, hearing from people that were excited, thought the Liberal campaign on the ground was strong, that I think was a good sign for a lot of people.
Yeah, look, I'm not looking at the Durham results and drawing conclusions about, Central Nova and, Avalon. But I'm curious about motivation in the GTA, Mel. And you talk about the examples that Greg highlighted there. Scott Moe maybe having some challenges. Blaine Higgs having some challenges. Justin Trudeau having challenges. All leaders who won elections during the pandemic and then find themselves on a shifting political dynamic on the other side of the pandemic. People opt for certainty in a time of uncertainty. Now maybe they want some change in a time of anxiety.
Yeah, and I think in kind of all of the places that you've just mentioned, people are really having a hard time. They're really feeling the crunch, and they're not seeing the fruit of what the government's putting forward. I think it'll be interesting. We're seeing the polls now. We're seeing the conversation now. We're still possibly quite a long way away from the election. I think all of us at this point are probably saying October 2025 is when we'll see it, and unless something happens that's a little bit more dramatic. But how that conversation shifts, if you're able to see the NDP take a bigger share of the conversation, if you're able to see the Liberals, to your point earlier, what's the story that they're telling? If you're seeing that, does that shift? Do we see the Conservatives make any mistakes, pull away from the message? We're still a long ways away, so more tea leaves reading, but that is a good point of how the pandemic has shifted the way that people are dealing now. The one exception that I'll proudly say when we talk about NDP fortunes is I'll point to British Columbia and how they, were in a minority going into the pandemic, won a majority in the pandemic, and are doing quite well today.
Yeah, but that yes, and we'll see, because David Eby has an election coming up and just had a big deficit, big debt budget, and a few challenges that always come with incumbency. Okay. Reading tea leaves, so you can put on the kettle to make a cup of tea, because we're going to show the latest number. There you go. We are seeing Jamil Jivani now growing his lead with 40 of 217 polls reporting. I have never been part of a decision test, but it feels like we're getting close to a point with a margin like this and numbers like this. 1555 to 732 for Liberal candidate Robert Rock. That's an 823 vote lead. Chris Borgia for the NDP at 306. And we're going to show you that trend line graphic that we're all going to fall in love with between now and the next election. And look, you can just see that, the trend lines. If this was a stock market, you'd want to be buying blue right now and maybe shorting some red, because the Conservatives are growing there, growing up to 53.1% of the vote with 40 of 217 polls in. It's a 2-to-1 lead. In terms of vote share, a little bit more than that for the Conservatives over the Liberals, and roughly the same kind of proportions from the Liberals over the Democrats right now. And Fred, the People's Party of Canada, sitting there at 5.5%, right? This is a number that they're determined to see shrunk and crushed and dispersed, or maybe consolidated with them. I mean, it doesn't matter here, but it's surprisingly high, maybe.
It is surprisingly high. I didn't think it would be that high in this by-election, where Jivani's running a very strong campaign going after that sort of vote in many ways, or the previous vote it would have had. So that is what's interesting, though, is he's still at 53%. He's still gone up considerably. So he's taken that vote from somewhere else.
Yeah, and the margins, I mean, that's a 28 percentage point margin. Aaron O'Toole in 2015 at the height of the Trudeau landslide was 9.4. 2019 in the first Trudeau minority was 9.9, and it grew to 16.5 in 2021 when O'Toole was leader. And you expect that kind of a bump for someone who's a leader and running to be the first prime minister in the GTA who holds a seat in the GTA. Stephen Harper held a seat in Alberta, but he was from the GTA. And so you can look at these margins here, you know, and this is why we're interested in Durham and what it may mean. The margins of victory in the Harper years when he was prime minister going up to a high of 33.4% in the majority year of 2011 versus the Trudeau years of single digits and then 16.5. This is what these are the tea leaves I'm interested in, Greg, you know, of whether you get back to those sort of Harper era numbers. I mean, you're already past, if this holds, the 2012 numbers. You're flirting with the 2008 numbers. Who knows? You might get up, you're kind of getting there now with some later, it's like up to 28, 29% sort of margin right now. But if you see it returning to those margins, I mean, let's talk about Ryan Turnbull. You know, let's talk about Jennifer O'Connell, and, you know, Liberals who've been there and hold seats nearby. Is there spillover? Is there anxiety about that? You know, they were targeted last time by O'Toole, and they didn't have the breakthrough they wanted, but
no, and that region has been fairly good to Liberals.
Yeah.
I do notice, though, that the People's Party numbers are exactly the same right now as 2021.
Is that right?
And so they were at 5.5 in 2021, and that's what the chart is showing right now. We'll see. Again, we may not, it'll be interesting to see in terms of the by-election in 2012 and this by-election, what the voter turnout is like, because I think that's an important context to have as well. But where, you know, where did the NDP vote go? You know, if People's Party is staying solid at 5.5, and the NDP vote drops considerably, there are some, you know, I'd be wanting to ask some questions there about, you know, did your vote just stay home?
Well, Mel, let's, sorry, Fred, you got to answer that before I go to Mel?
It's very possible it didn't stay home. It went blue.
And this is where I wanted to go, because we've talked a lot about the blue-orange switchers, right? Like this, you know, sort of a lot of blue-collar tradespeople, you know, and Chris Borgia, who is an electrician and president of the Durham Regional Labour Council. He ran in the 2022 election in Ontario. You campaigned with him, right?
I did.
You were there. Describe that voting dynamic. Is it possible that this is that appeal for that blue-collar, working-class NDP switcher vote that we might be seeing here in Durham? What are your thoughts?
It totally is possible. You know, somebody the other day was just asking me, why don't the NDP and the Liberals just merge then if you want to beat the Conservatives? And my response was, you fundamentally don't understand New Democrats if you think that that's something that most New Democrats want.
We also have this conversation every time the Liberals lose government. But anyway, keep going.
And the reason for that is a lot of NDP voters, and actually a lot of the ridings that the NDP currently holds are not orange-red seats, they're orange-blue seats. We see that in the western provinces very much, and we see that in Ontario as well. As for, is this part of the vote that's gone? It's possible. We've seen that in the national polling, that while the NDP is staying stable, they're pulling some of the Liberal vote, but they're losing some of the kind of orange-blue vote. So it's possible that we're seeing this here. Again, wait and see. We'll see how the results play out, but I do think that that's possible, actually, especially on the conversation of affordability, because we've seen that play out in other places and also nationally.
Okay, we have some more results for you. They're starting to count really fast. Thank you, Elections Canada. We appreciate the promptness. So have a look at the latest data that we have from the by-election in the riding of Durham, and it is continuing the trend of Jamil Jivani, the Conservative candidate, widening and expanding his lead. He's now got a lead of just under 1,300 votes over Robert Rock, the Liberal candidate, and Chris Borgia, the NDP candidate, further back at just 511. It's kind of the same proportions, right? The margins are kind of staying the same. It's like a 50, 25, 10 sort of split. I don't know if we're going to go to the vote share next, just to see where it is. Here we go. We're going to the vote share. It's like we've got this plan figured out. It's now a 30-point margin. Look at that, 30 percentage point margin for the Conservatives over the Liberals, 53.6% to 23%. The NDP back at 12%. And look, the People's Party, we just talked about stable, now they're in collapse, 5.5 down to 4.8%. Okay, those are the numbers. It is still a little bit too early for the CBC Decision Desk to make any kind of a projection, because we're waiting, to be very candid and transparent, to see what's going to happen with those advance votes. 10,000 votes can change the dynamic pretty significantly, and you don't want to call it and then have to uncall it. We have some experience of that with some American networks. So we're going to go back to Clara in Clarington, who's standing by with a guest. She's got another Conservative MP. We're all very happy to talk tonight. Clara.
That's right. I'm here with Colin Carey. He is the MP for Oshawa. For those of you across the country, Oshawa is a neighboring riding. How are you feeling tonight?
Oh, I'm feeling excited. The enthusiasm in the room is just contagious. Really enjoying it so far.
So I understand that you were quite involved in this campaign.
Absolutely. Jamil's my neighbor, so we were out door knocking with him. I tell you, I've never seen a candidate work harder than he has, and the feedback from the door is fantastic.
So across this campaign, we've been hearing about a lot of the different big issues that people are having. We had a conversation with the regional chair, John Henry, and he says that homelessness, addiction, and mental health have reached levels that have never been seen before in this region. He's calling for the federal government to do more. So if there was a Conservative government, what would you be doing to tackle this issue that's affecting your community as well?
Well, John Henry's a great leader in our community, and he has been very clear on communicating that something else has to be done. So Pierre has been out very strong, saying that people with addiction problems, they need treatment. So we're very committed to making sure that people who have addiction problems get the treatment that they need. As far as the homelessness, I think you've heard the slogans where we're going to be axing the tax, building the homes, fixing the budget, and stopping the crime. So when you have drugs, drug addiction, you have to manage the crime that surrounds that as well. So we've got a plan. I think Canadians hear it and they're resonating it. And it's great to see municipal leaders like John Henry actually taking a leadership role and pushing this government to move much more quickly with it.
So Jivani is ahead in the polls right now. How do you feel about that?
Excited, you know. Jamil is one of those candidates. He's young, he's enthusiastic about Canada, his community, and we need more people like him standing up, young people that are going to be the leaders of the future for this country.
Okay, so we have there Colin Carey, who hopes to be a future candidate with Jamil Jivani. We'll see if that comes true tonight.
Okay, Clara, thank you so much. That's the CBC's Clara Pasica from CBC Toronto. She's in Durham for us tonight. And folks, the CBC Decision Desk has seen enough. They are ready to make a projection. And the CBC Decision Desk is projecting that Jamil Jivani will be the next Member of Parliament for the federal riding of Durham, succeeding former federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole in his seat in the House of Commons. Jivani is a lawyer, a broadcaster, and a commentator who served as a special advisor to Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He is the author of Why Young Men, Rage, Race, and the Crisis of Identity, and he wrote openly about his battle with cancer. He is now in remission for stage 4 cancer. And Fred, he is described as young, millennial, and diverse. Not 3 descriptions you normally associate with the Conservative Party of Canada. What does this, and this is just a projection, by the way, folks. There's still advanced polls to come in, but the trend line is the trend line. The numbers are the numbers, and the riding is the riding. What does this mean for the Conservatives to elect someone like Jamil Jivani?
I think it shows how the party's changing in terms of new type of candidates that Poilievre is bringing in. They have different backgrounds, but they are all aligned with his ideology. And that's what we're seeing here. And I think we're going to see, based on, you know, he was a leader with the group that used to be the Manning Center. I think we're going to see him in a very prominent role in due course. Okay, I want to show you a live shot of Jamil Jivani's headquarters. This is where Clara has been bringing us interviews from. A muted response. You know, I'm not sure if they know. The CBC Decision Desk has made this projection as they gather at Chuck's Roadhouse in Clarington, Ontario, where charboiled burgers appear to be a thing. But this was an expected outcome. You know, as we were saying all night, Mel, there's the CBC Decision Desk projection, but then there's the expectations, the anticipation, and just the reality of a riding like this, that this is the outcome we all kind of expected from the moment Erin O'Toole stepped down and Jamil Jivani became the candidate.
And, you know, we mentioned it even off the top that this was likely what we were going to see tonight. The fact that they are doing so well in comparison to the Liberals, to your point earlier about closer numbers to when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, is, I think, something to pay attention to. We'll see where those numbers all land at the end, but not surprising that he is being projected as the winner for Durham, but we'll see exactly by how much he has won and what that means for his his caucus position, I should say. I should correct myself really quickly there, and what it means.
Funny, as the trend line solidified, we started to get some questions about what kind of cabinet role he might have. We'll talk about that in a second. Look, Greg, Mel's right. The vote share and the percentages will kind of be an important story. We may not know those numbers until tomorrow. We should caution not to overreact to what you're seeing in terms of vote share right now, because if it is truly 10,000 advance votes, that could change the math quite considerably. I mean, to the good for the Conservatives or to the bad for the Conservatives. What are your thoughts on Jamil Jivani winning Durham?
What I'm noticing is how much his age is being talked about, his millennial status. And I think back to 2015, the ads that the Conservatives ran against Justin Trudeau, just not ready. And ever since then, the three Conservative leaders have been younger than Justin Trudeau. Gen X, this is our moment, and apparently it's not going to last very long, and we're going to have to turn it over to millennials.
Welcome to Gen X, Greg.
We were barely here. But it is interesting, I think, that the Conservatives have decided to focus on younger candidates. There was an event recently where they showcased a couple of younger MPs as well as a potential candidate. We see a lot of this. So obviously this is a play that the leader has decided that they want to go in. So just a few, less than a decade ago, youth was bad. Now it's very good.
You're saying that because you're running old man Trudeau.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's 52.
He's still not ready,
but still not ready. Nice hair though. But sarcasm aside, I don't think it's a bad thing to have younger people in politics, especially, we were talking the other day about Brian Mulroney in my first election of 1988. We would have seen very much an older parliament, a very white parliament, a very male parliament, and a lot of people from very similar careers, such as probably law. So this is not a bad thing to bring more youth in, and I hope on the gender equity side, that's going to be able to be maintained as well.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the 1988 election. Jamil Jivani was born in 1987. So with the passing of Brian Mulroney, we talked a lot about that particular era, and Fred, when you're running as a party of change, going with younger candidates is a generational change as well as just a political change and an ideological change.
I would actually disagree. The Conservative Party regularly runs young people. It's just the last two elections we weren't winning, so they weren't getting elected. Going back to the roots of the old Reform Party, they were adamantly against a youth wing. And it was when we merged parties, it was a big fight.
Right.
And their reasoning was the youth have a seat at the table right now. Don't put them off in the sandbox. And it was the right choice. And we've always had young people. I remember 20 years ago when I was 25, there was a number of 25-year-olds elected to Parliament. Pierre Poilievre, Andrew Scheer, Jeremy Harrison, a number of guys that are still around. So we're constantly recruiting and bringing in young people to run. But again, now they're getting elected.
It's interesting when you look at it and compare it to the situation in the United States, where Joe Biden and Donald Trump are older than Al Gore and George W. Bush, not when they ran, but right now, right? They're older than the people who fought that election. And you look at, Mel, that Justin Trudeau is the tired old leader, in some people's words. I am not saying that. And he's like 52 years old.
Totally.
You're just getting going. He's got, in a U.S. political career. I mean, what can we draw from that sort of a generational shift in leadership over the last couple of elections in Canada?
Well, I'm just going to say, as a millennial on this panel,
she's dunking on us clear.
Now. I think it is actually really interesting because in 2015 the theme was, that Justin Trudeau was quote unquote too young, or that he didn't have the experience for it.
Nice hair though, I believe was the tagline.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But there was a shift there, and I think they were able to speak to young people in a real way where people felt heard and could see the hope that they wanted to have in their lives reflected in what the Liberals had to say. Now, I think these days, I think to give credit where it's due, the Conservatives are doing a good job at talking to young people and in reflecting, folks who were upset that they were locked up, or not locked up, were under lockdown for a few years and have lost either some of their high school or some of their college and are still living at home and feel like they can't see how they can buy a home. I think the Conservatives have done a good job at tapping into that frustration and speaking to young people, where you're seeing the kind of group of voters that Justin Trudeau and the Liberals were able to tap into 2015. Obviously not the same voters. I think those voters are obviously a little bit older now, but the same generation that they were able to inspire in 2015. I don't know if inspire is the right word for the Conservatives, but able to tap into that.
Motivate for sure.
Motivate,
mobilize, especially.
Absolutely. And you're seeing them, to again give credit where credit's due, you're seeing them do a good job, and to the point of young, diverse, new MP, that's always welcomed, and diverse experiences make for better parliament. So that's good too.
Okay, Greg, going to come to you in just a second, but I want to show how the Conservatives have mobilized people in Durham to the point that the CBC Decision Desk was able to make this projection. There's the top 3 candidates that we have been focusing on. Look, no one's coming back from that lead, even with that many polls reporting 75 of 217 counted. A 1,946 vote lead for Jamil Jivani, who the CBC News Decision Desk has projected will be the next Member of Parliament for the riding of Durham. The Liberals in second, the NDP in third. There's 9 candidates running, though. Let's look through what's going on there. In fourth place, the People's Party of Canada candidate with 299 votes. That's a 4.8% vote share right now based on what we have. The Greens are sitting at 2.2%. And Fred, you got to tell me about this Centre Party. I will confess. Do you know anything about this? I don't know. No. I saw this
today. So.
I was so focused on the top line. I thought this might be Dominic Carty's party, right?
That's the Canadian Futures Party.
Right, Canadian Futures.
But they're not running any candidates.
They're not running anybody, right? So my apologies to Khalid Qureshi and his supporters, but my apologies for that. All right, let's get to the last 3. See where we are on this. Independent, UPC, and Adam Smith, the invisible hand there with 9 votes. All right, now we're going to have a look at the vote share, and you can see where the top 3 numbers went on this particular thing. And look, it's now over 30 percentage points in the margin for the Conservatives over the Liberals. The NDP just at 11%. I mean, if they go below 10 percentage points, I'm going to say that's going to maybe be some... Mel's nodding. You can't see her, gang, but she's nodding. There's probably some tough conversations there because single digits when you're that far below the national polling. But again, maybe 8,000 of the 10,000 advance votes are New Democrats. Who knows, Mel? We don't know where that is. But
banking on it.
Yeah, banking on it. Yeah. So if you got a late proxy on FanDuel, folks, now's your chance. But look, we are seeing those sort of majority government margins, Greg. And again, there's still a lot of votes that can't come, and that could shrink. But as more votes have come in, it's actually widened.
Yeah, just keeping one eye on the polls. You can see that the lead is certainly extending. The Liberals and NDP vote much more static.
Yeah, so the good news is, I guess, Greg, and let's talk about this, is we got a budget date today. So another opportunity to change the direction of things and reshape the political narrative. Going back to the big picture, because, we're going to wait to see if we're going to hear from Jamil Jivani or one of his organizers or a campaign manager at the headquarters. Clara's been doing a great job for us, getting Conservative members of Parliament to come on the show. He might arrive in 10 minutes is what we're being told, Jamil Jivani. So we'll want to stay for that and carry his victory speech when that happens. The Liberals have got to take control of the narrative. Like Fred said earlier in the program, I don't know why they are still in government. I don't know what their story is. I don't know why they want to stay in government. They're running out of moments where they can start telling the country why. I think we know why Justin Trudeau wants to stay, to stop Pierre Poilievre, protect the things he's done, like childcare, Canada Child Benefit. How do they make that argument to voters? What have they got to do to build a narrative to justify a 4th Trudeau term?
Well, they've stuck to the housing and affordability narrative for some time. They've got a very active housing minister in Sean Fraser. You see other ministers making those announcements. But if I was to look at the polling right now, I'm not sure if it's breaking through or not.
Yeah.
Maybe people are happy with the announcement, but maybe not happy with the government. And this could be anger that's parked, or this could be anger that is going to want a change. Fred referenced something earlier about the the advertising that the Conservatives did. I've heard you say, you've noted before, that when the interest rates increased, there was a change.
That's where it widened.
Right? Around that same time is when the Conservatives started doing polling, started doing advertising to introduce the Conservative leader. And the Liberals never have. It could be argued that perhaps that's a financial decision. But I don't know if you can afford not to try to reach voters right now in some other way, because the way that you're currently doing is not having the effect that you want it. There's an argument that the polling was starting to come back for them at the end of the calendar year. Maybe that was just some off polling, but it seemed there was a couple of times
in time.
Yeah, that it was coming back for the Liberals. That's not happened, and we're now into March. So I think the Liberals have to try to figure out what is it that we need to do. The budget is now in April. I'm not sure if the passing of Brian Mulroney had anything to do with the timing, because the House is Parliament's only sitting 1 week this month, so there wasn't a lot of time this month.
Right, because there is going to be a state funeral for Brian Mulroney, and you've got to navigate around that.
And I expect speeches in the House, in the passing of a very, very prominent Prime Minister. So they've got to April to kind of get their ducks in a row, but they've not had a lot of successes the way that other governments have under, like Finance Minister Jim Flaherty or Finance Minister Paul Martin, where you captured a moment and you communicated something directly to Canadians. They've not had a strong track record on that. So to me, I'm starting to think that you only have one alternative left, and that's trying to go over the heads of media and speak directly to Canadians.
Which is what the Conservatives are doing, right? And Fred Gregg makes the point that, you go back to last summer, Tiff Macklem, Governor of the Bank of Canada, takes his finger off the pause button, interest rates go up twice in a month, negative reinforcer of sentiment. The ads hit the air, positive reinforcement of perceptions for Pierre Poilievre. There is no Liberal partisan advertising, and as part of their commitment when they formed government, they stopped what they considered to be the politically motivated government advertisement.
Right.
You go back to the Stephen Harper Canada Economic Action Plan. They're giving a rebate to people on the carbon tax that Saskatchewan is now defying. There's never really been clear, consistent advertising on that, certainly not at scale or a critical mass on the things that this government does. I don't know if that prohibition is working against them, but sort of an inability to articulate it themselves and then not have it reinforced by advertising. The messaging battlefield has been ceded to the Conservatives in a pretty substantial way.
100%. They're not using any of these mechanisms to tell their story about any of the programs they have, whether they're good or not. And we heard Michelle Ferreri talk about carbon tax and the cost of butter, and you pointed out the facts on it. But at the end of the day, it's really easy to see prices is going up. Conservatives are saying carbon tax is going up, so that must be what's happening.
Yep.
That's an easy message to tell over and over and over again.
And can I just say that when I do point out something like that, I get bombarded with attacks calling me biased. Like things are complicated. It's never one simple input that makes things. It's important to do this sort of thing, and you get. By the way, we're showing the live shot of the Jamil Jivani headquarters at Chuck's Roadhouse in Clarington, and we're expecting him at any minute. So we're going to go to the minute he does walk in, so that you can see the newly projected MP for Durham when he comes in. But this is one of the challenges, just to go back to the messaging argument, Mel, is that you'll see Pierre Poilievre or you'll see one of his candidates, you'll see them say something, and there's Jamil Jivani. We're going to listen in. Jamil Jivani has been projected by the CBC News Decision Desk to be the next Conservative MP for the riding of Durham, holding the seat held by former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole. Clara, you're in the room. Clara Pasica from CBC Toronto is there for us tonight. She's been her eyes and ears on the ground. Clara, what are you seeing and hearing? What are people saying?
There is so much excitement here. People are surrounding this candidate. There's a man with a giant paddle here that he's attached to the sign. People are just filled with enthusiasm. They just absolutely swarmed this candidate at the front of the stage here. Just so much excitement here in this room. It looks like he's getting ready to speak.
Did you say, Clara, did you say a giant paddle? Like a canoe paddle? What did you say? Had a giant what?
Yes, there's a man, he told, yes, he said it's because the Liberals are up a creek is what he said. So they'll need that paddle to paddle their way out is what he said. He's attached the campaign sign.
He's stolen the paddle.
To the paddle. He's come up from a different riding because he just is really, really happy about this victory.
Okay, I won't ask you which creek they're up.
The paddle is...
All right. Well, there is Colin Carey, who is a Conservative MP, appears to be introducing Jamil Jivani. We're going to listen in, and we're going to take the victory speech for the next Member of Parliament for the riding of Durham.
Awesome! Now, I got to tell you, when Jamil asked me if I would introduce him, I got to tell you, it was my pleasure. But I also want to tell you guys, it is my honor. Over the last few years, I've had the opportunity to get to know Jamil. And I got to tell you, he's one of the best individuals that I've ever met. Now, people ask me, when did I first hear about Jamil? Now, literally, I heard about him on the radio. I don't know if you guys realize this, but members of Parliament, we spend a lot of time in our cars. We have this really strange relationship with our cars. And when we're driving back and forth, it's like we want to listen to something. We want to listen to something intelligent, meaningful. And does anybody here, do you commute? Does anybody here commute? Put your hands up. What do you listen to? Political podcasts. What do you guys listen to over here? 1010. So talk radio. And Jamil, I remember the first time I heard him on the radio, his voice, the things that he talked about, he was just talking to me, was sincere, and he was talking about the things that are important to Canadians. So ladies and gentlemen, today we have the wonderful honor of welcoming our new Durham Member of Parliament, the man you can trust to axe the tax, build more homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, Jamil Jivani.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Well, we set out to send Justin Trudeau a message, and I think we were successful. Durham wants Pierre Poilievre to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, and I think that has been the resounding message from Scugog to Oshawa to Clarington, and I appreciate you all being here to celebrate this victory with us very much. Thank you. I also, of course, want to thank Colin for the very kind introduction. He has been a great mentor, a great friend, and a great neighbor here in Durham. So I have a lot of people to thank, and I'm going to do my best not to forget anybody. But of course, I want to acknowledge our campaign manager, Lee Boswell, on this fantastic victory. Where is Lee? Where is Lee? He's over there somewhere. He's usually hiding in the back somewhere. There you go. And we also have had a fantastic team of volunteers: Joseph Gainey, David Prashad, Ralph Mackin. We have Zoe Waller, Susan Twining. We've had Rhonda Kirkland, Andrew Morin, Rachel Boyd, Nelson Shepard, Takdir Brar, Josh Huberger, Alan Fabricant, just Sarah McDonald, and our incredible Durham EDA. Just couldn't have done this without you all, and we're very, very grateful to each of you. Yeah. Of course, I would also like to recognize my mom, yes, thank you, Mom. And my sister Jasmine and my brother-in-law Peter. They've been by my side during this whole journey, and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you guys. I love you very much. The writ period started 36 days ago on this campaign, and you may recall that it kicked off with Justin Trudeau calling me names. He called me a twofer, which some of you probably still haven't figured out what that means. I know it's very confusing. It was an odd time. But what I think, what was very interesting to me about it is I think it sort of signaled a few things that are worth remembering tonight as we celebrate this victory. The first is that Justin Trudeau doesn't really know what to do with people like me. And doesn't know what to do with a lot of people in this room. He looks at us and he thinks that his party owns us and owns our communities. He looks at me and sees a millennial, son of an African immigrant, grandson of a public school custodian, survivor of cancer thanks to our public healthcare system, and raised by a single mother. And he thinks that people like me owe his party something, that we have to fall in line behind his party. I obviously disagree. I think there are many conservatives like me. There are many conservatives who acknowledge that in 2024, it is our party that best represents the values of our communities. And in the candidates we nominate for the upcoming general election, and in the room right now, where you can look around and see the diversity of Canada is present here, you will see that Justin Trudeau better get used to it, because it's not changing anytime soon. No. He also likes calling people names because he likes to distract us from the issues that actually matter to Canadians and from the issues that people were motivated to vote on today. He wants us, having our eyes off the ball. And if there's anything I've learned from Pierre Poilievre and his fantastic team, it is the importance of focus and discipline so that we can get the job done of bringing change to this country. And I think you all are on board with that. I hope. Yes. Yeah. We have called this a carbon tax election. I said this 36 days ago. I said it earlier today. And the reason why is not just because of the financial penalty of the carbon tax. Of course, that is a serious issue. It is due to go up again 23% on April 1st. But it's also because of what the carbon tax symbolizes to people. Just 10 minutes from here, we were door knocking, as we are known to do, across the street from the South Curtis Hockey Arena. And a father who voted for the Liberal Party the last 3 elections, even had a Liberal sign on his lawn, told me he cannot vote for them again. And the reason is because of the carbon tax. And I was confused because I said to him, well, the carbon tax was an issue in 2019 and 2021, so why is it a problem for him now? Why is he making a voting decision based on the issue now? And what he explained to me was that it symbolized betrayal. That as life was getting more expensive for him and his wife and their daughter, as the cost of everything was going up and up, the Liberal Party decided they were still going to raise taxes on this man, making life even harder. And he really thought the Liberals and the Prime Minister cared about him. And his heart was broken to realize that they were putting a political agenda over people. So when we talk about what's happening in the country right now, I do think it is the liberal elites betraying the working people of this country, betraying the middle class, betraying the working class. And when I say liberal elites, I am talking about Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party, but not just them. I'm also talking about the liberal elites who run big banks and big telecommunications companies, driving up the cost of everything. I am also talking about the liberal elites who run the Ontario Ministry of Education in this province. I'm also talking about the liberal elites who are activists and academics and trying to consistently undermine law enforcement and public safety, leaving the most vulnerable Canadians with fewer protections from our justice system. When you want to spot them, it's pretty easy, and it's bigger than partisan politics. They're the people pushing DEI and ESG initiatives while hiking up the cost of living for hardworking people. They are the people who virtue signal and engage in performance theater while your life gets harder. And they're the people who serve the interests of a privileged few and make you feel like a bad person for expecting our country to work for you. And they are wrong. The liberal elites in this country are wrong, absolutely. You are not a bad person for believing that Canada should work for those who do the work. And I will never forget that father across the street from the South Curtis Hockey Arena. I will not forget his wife or his daughter, and I will not forget the tens of thousands of people I met in Oshawa and Curtis and Scugog who feel the exact same way he does. Hardworking people in this country deserve a voice in the House of Commons. Hardworking people in this country want change. Pierre Poilievre will deliver that change, and we will have his back on the way. So, I thank you all very much for being here. I thank the good Lord above for his protective hand over me and all of us during this process. And I ask that God bless each and every one of you, and God bless Canada. Let's go.
Okay, that is the victory speech from Jamil Jivani as he holds up a heavyweight championship belt, having won the riding of Durham in the by-election to replace Erin O'Toole, the former Conservative Party of Canada leader. Jivani won with a massive victory, even without all of the numbers in, over the Liberal candidate and the NDP candidate, saying in his speech that was as much a celebration of his victory as it was an attack and a critique on the Liberal Party of Canada, the Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and a litany of people that Mr. Jivani calls the liberal elite of this country. And we're going to talk about that with our panel in just a little bit. But as Jamil Jivani hoists his belt and goes off to celebrate the victory, we want to show you why he's able to do that and just show you the math and show you the numbers that we have. I don't know with precision whether the 10,000 plus advance votes have come in. I'm not sure at this point it truly makes a difference, because when we show you these numbers, you'll see just how large Jamil Jivani's lead is in this by-election in Durham. His margin has grown to more than 4,194 votes, and that's just with a little over half of the polls reporting right now. 140 of 217 polls reporting 7,102 votes for Jamil Jivani, who the CBC News Decision Desk projects has won the riding of Durham. Robert Rock, the Liberal candidate, is sitting in second place at 2,908. Chris Borgia for the NDP back again in third at 1,417. There were 9 total candidates. The People's Party of Canada candidate Patricia Conlon had 618 votes. The Greens are sitting at 273, and the Centrist Party at 184. And they're your final 3 candidates. Nobody cracking more than, might end up with about 200 votes or so once the final numbers are there, but everybody being dwarfed. All of them combined don't add up to Jamil Jivani right now, because when you look at the vote share, he is sitting at 55.5% of the votes. Now that will change when the final tally comes in, but the trend line, Greg will always have that first poll for you and the Liberals when you had the 18-9 lead. You can see that there in the blip at the start of the trend line.
It was indeed a special poll.
Yeah, it fell off a cliff pretty quickly there, and you can see the Conservatives, with a 33 percentage point lead over the Liberals, and the NDP at half of the Liberal support there. Now look, still a bunch of polls to come. That's going to change, but that is not a margin. That is going to be overcome. CBC News Decision Desk comfortable in projecting Jamil Jivani, who is scrumming right now. So we're going to go back to the Roadhouse in Clarington.
Believe that about me, and they believe that about our party right now.
Why do you think the Conservative Party is so strong? It's been the Conservative Party for like 27 years. Why is it so conservative?
Well, there have been a lot of very strong representatives from our party here. Bev Oda, Erin O'Toole, John O'Toole before him. So I think there's a very strong foundation for someone like me that I'm standing on. I'm very grateful to those who came before me. But I also think that, the Conservative Party represents the values of people in Durham. We represent hard work, family, faith, freedom, and that resonates with people here.
So speaking of the former leader, Erin O'Toole, who did hold the seat, when Erin O'Toole left politics, his final message was that politics had become too divisive and that it didn't need to be that way. Are those words something that you'll be thinking about as you fill his shoes as the candidate, as the now elected?
I just want to get the job done. So if being divisive means it's hard to get the job done, then it's a problem. But we have to be truth tellers, and we have to work hard, and we have expectations that we're going to deliver for people. That's my concern more than anything else.
Jivani speaking with reporters at his campaign party tonight in Durham, where he has won the by-election. And Clara Pasica from CBC Toronto has been helping us out throughout the night and doing a great job, asking him a question there about Erin O'Toole's final message in Parliament about politics becoming too divisive. And Freddie said in response to that, we need to be truth tellers. And he told some truths in that speech, talking about how Justin Trudeau and the Liberal elite have betrayed the working class of Canada. He's not just talking about the Liberal Party. He put in big banks, big telecoms who are making everything more expensive, the Ontario Ministry of Education and the progressive Conservative government of Doug Ford, activists and educators who are undermining police, pushing diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and environment, environment, social, and governance policies. He took aim at a lot of progressive ideas that are angering people on the right. Is that what we can expect from Jamil Jivani when he gets to Ottawa?
100%. It's what we've been seeing from the Conservatives for the last year or so, and he's amplifying that message. And he tells it in a very compelling way, in a tone that's aggressive but good, I think, that will resonate and will get through to people. He has a very interesting backstory that he tells as well that goes with it, and I think gives him credibility when he talks about this. Yeah,
Mel, he made the point. He said Justin Trudeau and the party think that they own voters who look like me and are like me. And talked about his upbringing, the fact that he's a black man and was raised by a single mom and relied on the healthcare system. Pushing back at the Liberal claim that they're the party of diversity. I mean, how do you think that's going to resonate?
Mm-hmm. And through that message also, not just by saying that, he's also saying, that the Liberals are entitled. They think they win because they are pushing these values. And talked about how they were performative as well. So I think that for a lot of folks, they're seeing that. And people who are having a hard time are saying, well, how come you're not standing up for me when you said you would? I think that is a fair comment that he said, and I think that that's the reality of a lot of people at the moment. I also, kudos to him, that was a line that made me go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're likely to hear him say more of that and take up that kind of space in the Conservative Party. So we'll see what else he kind of points out in that kind of frame.
Yeah, Greg, two other things that jumped out at me. He talked about the father he met. Whether this is apocryphal or not, it's a good illustration, who says that he voted for the Liberals in the last 3 elections, had a lawn sign, but felt that the increase in the carbon tax was a betrayal because ideologically the Liberals went ahead with it when things were getting more expensive. And he felt sort of punished by that. And then he also talked about how you shouldn't feel bad for wanting this country to work for you if you're a hardworking person, implying that the Liberals make people feel bad who say that. These were clear, sharp attacks at the government of the day. What'd you make of it?
3 things. First of all, congratulations to him. He ran a great campaign, big win. And congratulations, not to sound like Pollyanna, but everybody that works on a campaign, it's hard work. All of us have done it. And it keeps our democracy working. In terms of the carbon price, he's replacing Erin O'Toole, who, as the leader of the Conservative Party, ran on a price on carbon. And all the MPs that were elected in 2021 ran on a price on carbon, as much as they would like to forget that. Different. Apparently, you were supposed to put your money in to give it to the government and put it in some bank account, and they'd let you buy things with it. But
Fred might know this better.
Yeah. But it's. I don't think.
I think we published the platform before the Conservatives did. Anyway, keep going.
The third thing is, there was something in that speech that Bonnie Crombie, the Liberal leader in Ontario, is going to love, because he attacked Doug Ford's government. He attacked Doug Ford's Minister of Education with that line. He attacked teachers. He attacked bureaucrats. And sorry, Fred, this is not things that we've heard before. We have heard that there was not the best relationship between the Doug Ford government and Pierre Poilievre. But now we know that one of the star candidates just came out and the gloves are off. And I was quite stunned by that remark. I couldn't believe he was that blunt on it. And I think the provincial Liberals in Ontario will seize on that and have a field day.
So, Fred, just on that, this all came after he said Pierre Poilievre taught us the value of focus and discipline. And then he went off to diversity, equity, and inclusion, environment, social governance,
In this context, he did say liberal elites, and he said liberal elites in the ministry. I don't know who exactly he's talking about. I'm hoping it wasn't Premier Ford and Minister Lecce, and instead maybe some other folks that run the bureaucracy. But I don't know. That's something that if you get him on the show, you can ask him.
Yeah, well, Jamil Jivani, if you're watching, we would love to have you on Power and Politics at your first available opportunity, because you've given us a lot to talk about. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here because we have heard from the successful candidate. We just want to show you the math one more time to show you how we got here and why the CBC Decision Desk is very comfortable in making this projection, and obviously why Jamil Jivani is very comfortable giving a victory speech. So let's have a look at the vote share for the riding of Durham. 55.7% votes for the Conservatives right now, with 150 of 217 polls reporting. 33 percentage points, 33 and change, 33.2 percentage points over the second place Liberals, and a whopping 44 percentage points ahead of the NDP. We came into this night with Fred saying that if the Conservatives polled about 12% above the national polls, which is what you'd expect in a riding like Durham, that would be a very good night. It would show that those top-line numbers aren't fake, that they are in fact real, and it shows a motivated base ready to come out and vote for change. And even though this was a Conservative riding held by a former Conservative leader, even in the leanest times for the Conservatives of the Justin Trudeau era, you can see that that math does in fact add up. And Jamil Jivani, the CBC Decision Desk projects, will be the next Conservative Member of Parliament for the riding of Durham. I want to thank Clara Pasica from CBC Toronto, who is still there working hard in Clarington. She's going to be on your late local news in Toronto in a little bit, talking about these results. I want to thank Fred Delory. I want to thank Melanie Richer. I want to thank Greg McEachern. They're going to be back on Friday. This could very well be a topic we talk about as we take the pulse of Canadian politics on Power and Politics. And thank the team in the control room who have guided us through this online and social edition of Canada Votes by-election night. I'm David Cochrane. I'll be back at 5 p.m. Eastern on CBC News Network with the next edition of Power and Politics. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow on the regular show.